Hello and welcome. This is Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L'Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching. Hi, so today we are getting very close to the end of the year. So today we are going to talk about, it's related to New Year's resolutions, but it's more about like setting an intention for the new year. And the intention that we're going to be focusing on is the intention of being. So what does it mean to just be, to exist? And that's something we're going to explore in today's episode. I've been thinking a lot about this topic, and there are three things that come to mind. I'm going to use three because Eryn likes three. The first thing is, what does it mean to be? What does that look like? The second thing is, how is that going to appear in your life if you were to embody a state of being? And the third thing is, what are the benefits of that? Why do that? Why set that intention of being? So again, the first thing is we got to define it, right? What is being? What does it look like? It helps to kind of have an idea of, how does that going to show up in our life if we were to adopt that intention of being? And the third thing is, what is the benefit of such an intention? So, Eryn, I just wanted to turn it over to you and see what comes to mind with those three things. And if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so defining being and what it looks like. One thing that comes to mind for me for that first part of your three-part model is just thinking about when we set goals, instead of thinking about what we want to do, maybe defining who we want to be as a nice first step, and really recognizing when we can embody, and you use that word as well, who we want to be. That is more likely going to help us, move in whatever direction we want to move with our goals. So I really like that, taking some time to define and what it looks like. And in addition, setting the intention on what it is and benefiting from that intention. I think that's really important too, because when we can answer who we want to be, and we can also have intentionality around what that looks like, that makes it a lot more accessible for us to enter into whatever type of goal setting we may be moving into. Keeping in mind that, as we approach the new year, yes, we might be talking about goal setting, but we're really focusing on being, and being as a way of goal setting, really. So that's where my mind goes when I think of your model, and I love how you defined it here. What came up for you, L'Shawn, as you were, thinking about this over the past week?
Yeah, a lot that came up for me is the opposite of being, which is, I kind of feel like that's what I've been these past few weeks. I would say like most of December, I've been really in a mode of doing and living up to expectations and fulfilling obligations, and just and in a lot of ways being an autopilot. And for me, that is the opposite of what it means to be. Because to me, when we are in a doing mindset, that's always, there's nothing wrong with being in a doing mindset, but I do feel like there's an underlying premise that we have to make something happen, or we have to create something in an active way. And the opposite of that would be just sitting and allowing things to happen or things to come about or to emerge, to evolve. And I do, when I think about being in a state of doing as opposed to being, I think about controlling the outcomes. So when I'm in a state of doing, I have this idea of the way I want things to be. So then I feel like I have to act a certain way or do certain tasks, like it's an ingredient or it's materials to building something. And I believe that in life, it doesn't work that way. I feel like some of the best things that happen in my life happen unexpectedly. Our partnership, completely unexpected. I did not expect that I would collaborate with with another coach on a podcast. It just kind of emerged and evolved from our, getting to know each other and discussing, our own personal goals. And it just emerged in that way. So I think that that's very important to think about in terms of like emerging or evolving. But yeah, so that's what I've been thinking a lot about. Like, how am I, and it's also reactive as well. I think that for me personally, it's very reactive. It's like, this comes up and then I've got to fix it or I've got to come up with a solution. There's almost always like problems, but this happens in the nonprofit sector and any job or in life, like parenting. So what I would like to do is really take the time to imagine my life or imagine a day in my life where I'm not focused on controlling the outcomes and just willing to just sit back and let things happen. And even if something were to come up, what would it be like to approach that in a way where I feel like I don't have the answers and I don't have to search for the answers. I can just wait for the answers to emerge or observe or be more attuned to what's happening. Because often when there's a problem that arises and I think, okay, I got to find a solution to this, it limits my ability to see other options, to be innovative. And so that's what comes up for me when I think about being and defining it. I compare what it's not. What comes up for you, Eryn?
You had said observe, I think twice, and I think that's such a key word here in kind of relating back to our podcast on curiosity as well. And, and you can sit back and have the time and space to observe with non-judgment and potentially with curiosity or just awe and wonder, just that kind of flow state of being. That can often lead to better results, right, than us having a very key directed goal behavior that we're focused on. Because if we approach our goal setting in that way, sometimes we miss out on what other cues are coming up naturally as well as within ourselves to better achieve that goal and better attain that goal. And so that takes me back to kind of starting with this idea of who do you want to be? Well, I want to try and be someone who does observe and take some time, because solutions and quick fixes and goals don't have to happen quickly. And this is where I have a lot of faulty thinking in my own life, think that they have to happen right away, or I have to move on to the next goal if that goal is not working. And so my hope for the new year is that I can sit back a little bit more in that observation stage and just take in what's being brought, whether that's from other people or relationships or ideas, and then use that however I want to, maybe even just to feel a certain level of acceptance. And really that goes back to who I want to be. I want to have this feeling of maybe some lightheartedness or acceptance. And that then allows me to be in the new year someone who I can identify with, someone who feels a little bit more whole potentially. So it's interesting because I frame these in my mind as kind of goals. I have goals to be to be. And so how I want to bring that back to avoid, not necessarily always avoiding goals, but stepping away from the thinking that we have goals and instead just answering some of those questions that are maybe more thought provoking up front around who do I want to be? How do I want to approach situations that I'm dealing with? And just letting those sit and thinking about them and um, not hurrying into any sort of answer, I think is going to be helpful for me in the new year. It's also going to be a challenge because I do love a good goal directed theory and I do love helping people meet their goals as well. But I also recognize this part is so important to, to the goal piece as well. So that's where I go. Um, I like what you said about not controlling the outcomes as well, and how when we shift into doing, we're trying to control the outcomes. And could you speak more to that? Because I think that's a really important concept.
Yeah, I think that, okay, so for example, if we like set an intention or a goal to do a party, let's say we're going to throw a party. This is a time of parties, right? Get togethers with family and holiday parties. There's so many. And let's say that we have this intention that we want everyone to have fun. We don't want anyone to be bored. We don't want cousin Jim to have a fight with cousin Joe. And so we make it so that these things, so we try to create circumstances and conditions that will prevent that outcome or that will result in that outcome. And so when we're working on this party, let's say we make sure that Jim and Joe are not in the same room, or we make sure that everyone has something they like in the party. And I think that that is our idea of, okay, so if everyone has their favorite food, then everyone will have fun. However, we really don't know what is going to result or what is going to cause people to have fun in a given moment. What controlling the outcomes is making decisions in such a way that we believe that that decision, that task, that placement, or that choice is going to lead to people having fun. Whereas I think if we were to go from that from a being perspective, I would plan a party based on how I feel, like what's the joy? Like I really enjoy these decorations. I love this scent, or I love this food, and I really enjoy this, and I'm having so much fun, and this is so great, and I'm so happy to have my family or my friends here, and then letting it go. Instead of being like, okay, so if I have mashed potatoes, then, my family will like this. And if I have this tree and this decoration, they'll be happy, rather than just letting it be and not focusing so much. You do, of course, have an intention to bring joy or comfort or, to have delicious food. However, you cannot control whether or not someone's going to like mashed potatoes or someone's going to feel joy when they see the tree. They might see your tree and cry because it reminds them of a time when a loved one was with them. You have no control over how people are going to react or how people are going to respond to a situation. So why not let go of that and just enjoy putting together a party that brings you joy, that brings you a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, and have the faith that other people will like that as well. And also, if you are in a doing mode where you want to control the outcomes and you want to make sure that Jim and Joe don't get into an argument, you could be hyper vigilant about Jim and Joe the whole time, not present with your guests and be like, oh, where's Jim? Where's Joe? And totally miss the experience. So that's an example that comes to mind when I think about being in a state of doing, as in you're controlling the outcomes. You're doing everything you can to control the situations, the circumstances, in order to bring about a certain result, or just having fun and enjoying and bringing people together and just letting it see what happens. Because you never know. If you just kind of let it go, and maybe Jim and Joe might have a nice conversation and they might make up and they may not, argue. You just don't know. So that's kind of what I have in mind. What comes up for you?
I love that example because it started to create this dichotomy or dissonance in my brain in a way that there's like this piece of anticipating people's needs and there's this piece of controlling a situation. And it's kind of like an art form when we can anticipate people's needs by showing care without trying to control the outcome or control the situation. We find that balance possibly in the situation. And I mean, this comes up all the time at holidays where I think so many people are trying to manage other relationships in the room. And I love how you said, let's take a step back and look at our own joy and how we're providing that. Because I think that outwardly shows and people recognize this is a space that'll be fun and I can, let my guard down a little bit. And so it's more about my being and controlling and maybe not controlling, but tending to and honoring my joy in the moment. Well, yes, also anticipating some needs, but not, trying to overly control things. I think that's a powerful message for the holidays and into the new year as well. I like that example. Yeah, so thinking about being, how do you get things done when you're being? uh,
That's a good question. I was thinking the same thing, especially because I am of a mind that if I don't like, so for example, the dishes are in the sink, and if I just like sit and let it emerge that the dishes will be done, if I'm the only one who's doing the dishes, they're just going to sit in the sink. It's not going to automatically be done. Now, of course, someone else in the house, or if you live alone, definitely the dishes will just stay in the sink. Unless, of course, by some random thing, a friend comes over who is, who loves cleaning and they clean your dishes. But it still does feel like if I just sit and let things emerge, how do things happen? How do I make things happen? If I just sit and let things emerge, how am I going to make the money? How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed my family? So that's a good question. And one thing that I think about is in terms of um, letting things happen, in terms of there are certain situations in which we can let things emerge and let things kind of happen. And there are situations where we actually do have to do something, but we can still be in a state of being while we're doing that. I think that, like you said, there's a balance. You said there's a balance between anticipating people's needs and trying to control the outcome. So I think there's a balance between just being in a certain situation, just letting things happen while, tending to necessary things like getting from A to B. But I am curious to know, is it possible to exist with very little action where you only take inspired action, where you don't take any action unless it feels like, oh, this is something that I feel compelled to do. This brings me joy. This excites me. I'm curious about this. I wonder about that. That would be an interesting experiment. Someone like who could, or maybe I would experiment this year and see how often I can just be in a state of being where I let things emerge, and what happens, and could I be okay with that? And then,
you know what was interesting? So I guess we had to take a short break during our time recording this episode due to another work commitment. And I was waiting, sitting here, thinking about being, and all I could do was get caught up on work tasks when I had this prime opportunity to sit and observe my thinking, and observe what was going on around me. And I did that a little bit, and I've had this horrible respiratory virus for weeks, and I just sat there and I could really feel, what I was feeling with this virus and how it's really been difficult with that. But uh, otherwise, I'm not necessarily going through my day really thinking about this virus in this way. Or I don't know. It was a really interesting experiment in being where I failed the test. I started doing. And then when I started to get curious about how he's feeling, I'm like, wow, I don't feel good. So I don't know. Yeah, what to take from that.
Well, the things that came up for me was I was curious. So when you were focusing on being and you started to really feel the effects of the virus on your body, I'm wondering when you went from being and experiencing the effects of the virus on your body and switching to doing, like when did that happen?
A good question. I think I did make that intentional choice to move from recognizing how I was feeling to being like, oh, there's this really easy work task I can do. I might as well just do that now that I've felt what I needed to feel, rather than sitting with that feeling longer or observing things a little bit longer. So my brain just made this choice, and I made this choice to move on.
Yeah. So I wonder if um, the the desire or the um, tendency to switch from being to doing has something to do with discomfort. Is it a coping mechanism that we have developed to, like, speaking for myself, because that's one of the things that resonated when you said that, you were focusing on being, and then the feelings that you were more aware of the effect of this virus on your body, and like the ickiness that comes with, having a virus and dealing with all the symptoms that go with that. And one of the things that I notice is when I'm in a doing state, it's almost always when I'm reacting, I should say, I'm reacting to discomfort. For example, I feel that there's a problem, something that needs to be solved. And the way that it shows up in my body is like, the closest I can get to is like a kind of uneasiness in the stomach, and tension in the shoulders and the neck and in the jaw. And so I automatically, instead of uh, experiencing that discomfort, that physical discomfort that comes with the stress of something being wrong or something that I perceive as a problem that needs to be solved, something that needs to be fixed, I go into action, whatever it takes to relieve or alleviate this tension in my body, this uneasiness in my stomach. And I find that often when I immediately react to that uneasiness and discomfort and I go into action, more often than not, it's the result is not satisfactory. Or later I'm like, okay, I did this and this and this and this to make this better. But then I realized that if I had just taken a moment to pause, and going back to what you said before, and that you noticed that I was saying anyway, I observe the situation and I take the time to really take in all factors, everything that's in play here, then I could have prevented these unnecessary things that I did in the moment simply as a result of wanting to alleviate that tension in my body. And I wonder if I were to adopt a practice of not reacting to that tension in my body or that uneasiness in my stomach, and just be like more curious, to bring back other terms that we've used, more curious to know, okay, so I feel this way. Why do I feel this way? Is this situation urgent? Do I need to take action right now? Or can I take a moment and just take in everything and make the best decision? And I think more than anything, when I shift into a doing mode, it's because I'm responding to discomfort.
Yeah, and maybe not even responding, but reacting. Because I think what
Yes.
you're talking about too is like this difference between reacting to something and responding. And responding is more mindful, more informed by our being. And then reacting is not as mindful and more informed by our discomfort, as you said. Yeah, I really like discerning, maybe having some discernment with those terms and thinking about how being can help us respond. And when we respond from a place of being, we are responding from a place of wisdom. It helps us access our wisdom. And in doing so, if people are thinking about goal setting in the new year, it helps one really create the goals that are more in tune with who they really are and what they really need and what to call into their lives, as well as possibly accomplish or not, because there is still some level of intentionality with being, and if I work to develop that a few days a week, day in and day out, there's still that intention there. And I like that word instead of goal in a way, because it really relates to hope theory, which I love. Thinking about, we have pathways in our agency to goals. And when we can focus on our own agency and our pathways, right, the goals take care of themselves. So instead of being so goal directed and being kind of blinded by, I have to achieve this, we can really just focus more on who we are, our agency, and what our pathways are. So I like how being helps us access all parts of what we know to be effective goal setting methods or intentions.
Yeah, there's several things that come to mind when you mentioned about wisdom and then also intention. And did you say hope theory? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of not being so goal oriented, but rather, I guess, more focused. Because when you said the thing about hope theory and then you contrasted it with being goal focused, and then the hope theory about just letting the goals kind of take care of themselves. If you could just repeat again what you said about hope theory again, just so that I can get a better idea of what that is before I say more about what's on my mind.
Yeah, really what this theory says when we talk about goal-directed behavior is that we really want to focus on our agency and our pathways. So our agency being, who we are, our self-efficacy, our belief in ourselves, those sorts of things. And then our pathways are all the routes we have to get to an outcome. And each of those routes can take on a little bit of a different meaning. So if one isn't working, you could deconstruct that to construct a different pathway. And the more specificity you have within the pathway, the more likely it is to get to a goal. But my main point, I think, with this theory is that it doesn't focus on the goals so much as it focuses on who we are as those pathways.
Okay, so I'm glad you clarified that for me and reiterated that, because now I have a clear idea of where I was going with my comment, and that is it's very, it's focused on the journey rather than the destination, process focused rather than product focused, and I think that it just really does go back to when I'm going to speak for myself. When I'm in the doing mode, I'm most certainly goal oriented and I'm focused on the product. I'm focused on the results. I want to control the outcomes. Whereas with the hope theory, where you're looking at pathways, agency and pathways, to me, that's more of like a being mindset, because you are more, if you're going to be focused on your agency, who you are, it's really important to be present, because a lot of the things that go on in our lives, um, that are that we're reacting to, that's really, I think, in my own experience, we're reacting to often the past. We're reacting to um, you know things that remind us or trigger us, uh, that then lead to a kind of conditioned response to, or conditioned reaction to a stimulus or to something that comes in. It's very familiar. So then we start reacting to the familiar feelings of that condition. So even though the condition is different, it brings about thoughts or feelings or memories of something in the past. And so then we're not really reacting to we're not really reacting to a present thing. We're reacting to something in the past. And in order to be aware of your agency, of who you are, I think it's really important to be in the present, because we're constantly changing, adapting to changes in our environment. And things are not the same. They might be similar, but they're not the same. So if we are present and we are aware of our intention of who we want to be, going back to defining being, uh, we are more likely, I think, to be focused on being, as opposed to being goal oriented, where we're focused on, what we want to have happen, that really we don't have an idea. This is weird, but we don't have an idea of what how something is going to how something is going to end, or because it's in the future. So if we're focusing on the end result, the only thing that we really have to um, reference when we're creating something in the future, something we haven't seen before, is the past. And so in focusing on, I want to create something, I want to make this end result, I have this idea of an end result, but the only idea comes from past experiences. So I think that's what causes us to repeat our past, to repeat things, to have similar outcomes. And it denies us the opportunity to experience new things. And I think when we're children, it's different. I think when we're children, we have fewer past patterns to fall back on. So we have that wonderful opportunity for things new to come up and to emerge in our experience. Whereas when we're adults, we're more focused on the template, and we're not building new templates for the most part. I mean, if you think about your job, your 9 to 5, or what you're doing in most of your life, once you're an adult, you get into a career path, and you're just maybe defining and refining and honing your skills, but you may not necessarily be building new ones or emerging. New skills aren't emerging because you're just constantly doing the same thing. Maybe better, maybe more efficiently, but it's the same thing. So that's what I think about when I think about what you say about hope theory and how important it is to take the time to figure out where you are in life, and step out of that pattern of, doing things the way you always do it, what's comfortable, what's familiar, and be able to embrace the unknown and be like, I think I'm going to just, normally I do this for this similar problem, but today I'm going to sit and I'm going to figure out where I'm at in this and what could emerge from this, what new things can I learn from this, and see where that takes me. So those are the things that were coming up for me when you were talking about hope theory, and comparing it to being like more goal oriented. It's really,
I love everything you just said. It sounded so wise. And as you were talking, I'm like, yes, this is putting the connections in my mind together around this concept of being and utilizing hope theory and those things. So I really enjoyed everything you just said. And I think this idea of we have our thinking patterns and our feeling patterns and our behavioral patterns and how those have shown up for us time and time again. When we can be a little bit more mindful, we can recognize when they're not working rather than reacting when they're not working. And that's a chance to make a shift, right? That's a chance to make a small adjustment. It doesn't even have to be anything beyond something that might take up 30 more seconds or something, right? That's where we can enter in to trying on things that are low risk but high reward for us. And we all have those behaviors and thoughts and feelings that have gotten us so far. Part of it is our coping strategies, right? And it's like, how do we update that coping toolbox so that it is grounded in more being and mindfulness and maybe less in reaction mode. And even just looking back and I'm thinking through like all the times that I've tried kind of the same thing in my life and it never worked. And I do it anyway and it never works. And I keep doing that. It's like, okay, at some point, my wise self needs to step in and say, I'm going to make a small shift here. I'm going to interject so that I make some level of an adjustment that brings me more into the present, that brings me more into mindful behaviors and being more mindful about my own thinking and feeling. And I like how you compared that to being a child and how that might be a little bit more natural based on, the stages of development and the experiences. And I think that takes me back to, I want to embody, as part of your model at the beginning, embody that level of childhood, making adjustments and trying on new things, not to an extent that it's much different, but to something that's, really small. So for instance, even thinking about this virus, like I always get some level of sickness at the highest stress points in the year, right? And L'Shawn has seen me through this. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to power through this. And then I end up getting more sick than I should have in the beginning. This has been a repeated pattern of non-being and non-mindful behavior of mine since I was, a teenager. So I've been more aware of this, but I'm trying to find a way to make a shift or make an adjustment to be more mindful of it. So that's just a recent example of how this has come up for me in my own life and how I can apply what I've talked about and L'Shawn's talked about today on this podcast. So I guess maybe it's time for a coaching nugget of wisdom, and mine would be to not only think about who you want to be in the new year, uh, write that down, share that with others, but also recognize those opportunities to make really small behavioral adjustments in your own life. So if I want to be just generally more mindful in the new year, I might say, I'm going to take, 30 seconds twice a week at the end of my work day to have some form of ritual to close out that day and move me into my evening with my family. That's just one example. L'Shawn, what's your coaching nugget of wisdom?
Wisdom comes from you, Erin. I like your example of that, the pattern that you of pushing through when you're a little bit sick and then you end up being even more sick than probably who knows you would have been, who knows, with these things. But that, just taking the time. So one thing that I would say for a coaching nugget would be to, in the new year, take an inventory of patterns that you have relied on that may not be serving you. And then, to take from what you said, Erin, about making a minor adjustment to that pattern that you identify that's not serving you, and see where it takes you. And please let us know how that shapes up shapes out in the new year. I certainly want to do that myself, is to take an inventory of the patterns that I have. I can think of so many right now, but I think I'm going to choose one pattern that I have that is just, something that is my go-to for a certain situation, but every time it's the same unsatisfying result or unsatisfactory result, and how I can adjust that a little bit in the new year and see where it takes me.
Yeah, and I hope we hear from our listeners on those. And I hope LaShawn and I can work together to help us move forward with these new adjustments we're trying to include in our own lives as well.
Yes, absolutely. And share with our listeners how we're doing, what adjustments we're making, and how it's turning out in the new year. Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm LaShawn with Mayshell's Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day. Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm L'Shawn with Michelle's Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.